Do you want to be ahead of the game for the latest in arts, music, cuisine, and entertainment across the Middle East's most dynamic capital cities? Al Monitor is proud to launch our City Pulse newsletters, focused exclusively on local news, starting in Riyadh, Dubai, Istanbul, and Doha. Each week, our on-the-ground writers in these cities cover the latest cultural happenings and trends, so you have everything you need to know for the best local experiences. To subscribe for free, go to almonitor.com, that's al-monitor.com, and sign up on our newsletter page.
Welcome back to the Al Monitor Brief. I'm Adam Lucente. U.S. President Donald Trump announced 10% tariffs on U.S. imports on Wednesday, as well as higher tariffs on countries he accused of engaging in unfair trade practices. Gulf states and Turkey were spared the higher tariffs and are merely subject to the 10% rate. Iraq was hit with a 39% tariff, however, while Jordan received a 20% one. Israel is subject to a 17% tariff, even after saying they would nix all their own tariffs on U.S. goods. The trade policy could have significant effects on the Middle East, and oil prices fell considerably on Thursday. However, many regional players may opt to keep quiet, despite any reservations, in order to preserve warm ties with the Trump administration amid numerous conflicts. My guest this week is Al Monitor's chief business correspondent, Jack Dutton. Jack recently wrote an analysis on how the tariffs are affecting the Middle East and offers insight into the many factors at play. Hope you enjoy. Jack, welcome back to the Al Monitor Brief.
Thanks for having me back on, Adam.
Yeah, thanks for joining. We really enjoyed reading your analysis on these Trump tariffs and how they're affecting the Middle East. The first question is, which countries in the region fared the worst in the tariffs, and why is that?
Sure. So it was a very significant day yesterday with Donald Trump announcing a baseline 10% tax on all imports to pretty much every country in the world, and also elevated tariff rates, reciprocal tariffs on dozens of countries in response to their respective trade barriers with the United States. In terms of the region, a lot of the Gulf countries and Turkey were fine, and they had the baseline rate of 10%. However, some Middle Eastern nations fared a lot worse. For instance, Jordan faces a 20% tariff, Libya 31%, Iraq 39%, and Syria 41%. There's different theories about how the Trump administration calculated these numbers when it comes to the tariff percentages. There's been a few reports positing that these tariffs were calculated by dividing the trade deficit of that country last year in 2024 by the total imports to the United States. So dividing this figure by roughly half gives the US reciprocal tariff percentage. So when you look at the list which Trump held up, the tariffs charged to the US are roughly double the amount of the new reciprocal tariffs. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And why were Gulf states only subject to the 10% baseline tariff? As you mentioned, they did not receive as high a tariff as some of those other countries. Why is that?
So it's mainly a reason for exposure. So Gulf region exports, which are mainly energy and raw materials to the US, haven't been directly targeted by the sanctions. And instead of running trade deficits for the US, a lot of the Gulf states actually run surpluses, and their economies haven't suffered as much from American tariffs. What's more, Trump gets on well with a lot of the Gulf leaders and really values their relationship and the investments that they've pledged to the United States. For example, in January, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, committed to invest $600 billion into the US on different fields, including AI and energy and tech. And for Trump's first visit, foreign visit since assuming office again in January, is going to be to the Gulf, including Saudi Arabia and likely Qatar and the UAE. So they've managed to escape the worst of it for those reasons.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with Jack Dutton after this short break.
Today's transformation of the Middle East is at the center of global geopolitics. Whether you're an analyst, diplomat, executive, or academic, you need the best reporting and analysis to understand what's really happening on the ground and what it means for the world. Al Monitor is the award-winning independent leader in Middle East news. From Riyadh to Beirut, Abu Dhabi to Doha, and Baghdad to Tehran, our team of over 100 expert journalists report daily on the top stories driving the regional trends. Download our mobile app and subscribe to Al Monitor to follow what leaders and decision makers are reading every day. Go to almonitor.com, that's al-monitor.com, and use promo code POD25, POD25 for a discount.
Okay, we're back. Jack, my last question is about kind of the regional view on all this. How does the Middle East view the tariffs, and what responses are we seeing so far from regional states, or what are some of the responses we might see in the coming weeks?
Yeah, I mean, so far, when you compare the Middle Eastern political leaders to the likes of the European Union, Canada, and China, who've all been subject to quite big levies, they've been relatively silent. They've not said too much. A lot of the tariffs which Donald Trump introduced prior to the ones yesterday didn't really impact many of the sectors. There's some on automotives that came in yesterday, and the Middle Eastern countries are not the main exporters of automotives, cars, and trucks to the US. That's more like Japan and Mexico. And also, the one which probably had the greatest impact was the aluminium tariff, because the UAE is one of the biggest exporters of aluminium to the US. But generally, a lot of the tariffs have not significantly impacted Middle Eastern economies. However, and also they've been quite, for political reasons, quite clever in terms of not trying to aggravate Trump, because many Gulf countries and countries in the region depend on Washington for security and military cooperation and investment, whether that's to counter regional threats like, for instance, Iran and Iran's kind of so-called axis of terror and proxies in the region, or whether that military aid given to Israel to kind of fuel its conflict in Gaza. So publicly criticizing the Trump administration and its policy towards trade risks upsetting this balance, and Gulf countries have got quite a lot of capital spare to deploy, and they've been trying to appease the US through promising these grand investments. As I said earlier, with the Crown Prince of Saudi pledging all the billions of dollars into the US, and Donald Trump has made no secret that he's very transactional. That is part of the reason why he's visiting the region first. And generally, when you look at a history, even when you look with the Biden administration and go further back, many leaders in the region kind of prefer diplomacy over confrontation. They would rather not comment on these sort of policies, and they're often kind of caught at the center of two great powers, because a lot of the Gulf countries, say Saudi Arabia and the UAE, have quite close ties to China, which is America's longtime kind of economic and political foe. So they're always quite careful to kind of balance the line between appeasing Trump and the US, but also not stepping on China's toes as well.
Jack, thanks so much for your insights, and we look forward to more of your reporting on the tariffs and the regional fallout.
Great. Thanks a lot, Adam. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Al Monitor Brief. Be sure to follow Al Monitor for more on the stories impacting the Middle East. Until next time, I'm Adam Lucente.